Christmas. The winter markets can stay open until after, but they can't call themselves Christmas market.
She decided not to live in the Chancellery building, which we're going to see in the distance later on. The White House. There's still a couple of police officers outside. And when she was when she was the leader, I always used to say to people, "Oh well, they're very respectful in Germany." And then they had a gentleman on a horse with a member of the German security force, and it was like, he was like, no, the Secret Service have a whole floor, and I was like, oh, probably a good
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, you had it.
So I thought, well, that's probably a good thing because I've told thousands of people. So, and one of my for safety reasons. So one of my I'm afraid that I won't have to listen. So, but what we write it's my favourite story about Angela Merkel is the Whole video. Had moved from West Germany to East to a minister, and he moved overseas.
Nous allons aussi voir le mur de Berlin, mais ça on le fera demain. Parce qu'il y a un endroit avec le mur de Berlin qui est bloqué d'un élément. On sait qu'on ne va pas vous laisser partir comme
This is the Lust Garden. 1933, some months after Hitler had come to power as Chancellor and then consolidated power, as we're going to talk more about as we carry on, certainly when we get round to the Reichstag, he gave a very famous speech from the steps of this building. This was one of very few buildings in the city of Berlin that Hitler actually really, really liked. And that's because he tried to be really famously hated Berlin. He saw it as the site of cultural and intellectual experimentation in the 1920s. It wasn't the Germanic heartland, if you like. You saw it as being much more Slavic. It had a very high Jewish population in comparison to other cities. It didn't have a very high Jewish population, but just in comparison to other German cities necessarily. But he gave a speech from the steps of the building there on the 1st of May 1933, very much looking to capitalise on the idea of a workers' holiday, the workers' holiday. The next day, the 2nd of May, all labour unions and workers' unions, trade unions are shut down completely, and some thousands of members, trade unionists, labour leaders, unionists, are sent to concentration camps and forced labour camps. So, and it's important to remember, when you're thinking about the Nazis, the National Socialist regime, they are not socialists, they are eventually murdering, hundreds of thousands of us. So, just because you say it in a name doesn't make it true. Kind of like East Germany, the Germans. You guys think. So, good. And not the Aussies. we have Aussies? Yes. Canadians? Canadian. Americans? Yes. Anyone want to claim anywhere else?
New Zealand.
New Zealand, thank you.
South Africans?
South Africans.
Oh, yeah,
fantastic.
baby.
Hello. Spain? Malaysia, fantastic. Good. Good, we're a good spread. Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Which building had that swastika on it that was notoriously
That was
shut
down
up?
in, I think the one you're thinking about that was blown up was in Nuremberg.
Yeah.
So that was down in Nuremberg where the Nuremberg rallies were held. Yeah.
That was at the parade grounds.
So let's come down this way, everybody, okay?
Parade grounds?
Yeah.
Yes, in Nuremberg.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was there. We were there. April 29th, 1945, the Allies blew it up.
Yep.
And there's a picture of it getting blown up.
Yeah, everywhere.
And an Allied soldier was on the roof at the time. But I actually get this sick.
Willie, you have so many videos to look back on, won't you?
It's actually for my husband. Yeah. It's for him, yeah.
I'm a good photographer.
So everyone, I'm sorry that I'm having to kind of like get you all together and you can't. Usually it's very nice on these tours you can kind of wander off and take some photos and look and listen if you would like to. But if you want to listen to me now, I'm just going to talk briefly here and then we're heading back to the bus, okay? But I do want to point out, sorry, everyone glare into the sun, don't do that. But this building over on the other side of the road here, okay, this building, I don't know if anyone wants to. Originally it was the Hohenzollern dynasty's palace was always on that site. Don't know if anyone wants to hazard a guess as to how old that building is. Old. But it's a bit of a trick. Now we know where we are. For reasons best mentioned, I have no explanation. So that is the So, what's everybody? The Brandenburg Gate, you can see it over there. The Brandenburg Gate was originally built in 1791 around medieval towns. You always had gates that controlled taxes and tariffs.
Michael Jackson tossed the baby out of the window at Hotel Adlon.
Palace, and then down the road that way you have the City Palace. So between the two palaces you have a nice procession. And the lady on the top there, the quite regal with the full horses, she was originally put up there and she was named Irene or Irene as the goddess of peace. In 1806, Napoleon and the French invaded and they put her down and come back to Paris with them after they did the one lot of the 10 years later when the Napoleon got her back, they put her back up there and they renamed her Victoria as the goddess of peace. She's not messing around. We always joke that her head is inclined in one particular direction and she's just glaring ever so slightly at one particular building, which I'm not sure if you can see what that is. Don't say Starbucks. French embassy. And there would have been a French consulate building there during the idea that she's kind of looking down on it. And also, this is Parisier Place.
This is a French embassy. This is the Embassy of the United States of America.
Al problema que vestí. ¿Y qué tal? ¿Cómo estás? Muy bien. Este es el nuevo. Espera, espera, ahí te pasó mamá.
Sorry. Don't want you to fall down.
Door.
You're just kind of coming at the end of the change of the season as well. Berlin is very colourful with the changing of the leaves. It's very beautiful in the autumn time, and then it just gets very, very, very grey. So that's kind of a tough one in the winter. We do have really nice summers, but then the winter does get very, very grey. And with a lot of the architecture, a lot of the buildings being a lot more modern, they can be very grey as well. So it's definitely something that you kind of have to shore up. You have to get your sunshine. Oh, really good. Well, lots of artwork on the building on the right that you can see there as well. It's going to be a common theme as we go around the city today. So we're coming more centrally into the city now, everybody, and we are going to be taking in some of the more kind of classically beautiful areas of Berlin. There aren't that many of those areas in the city, that kind of neoclassical style that was very popular in the 18th and 19th centuries all across Europe. And Berlin, as a capital city, it's about 800 years old, so it's relatively young in comparison to a lot of other European cities. But it was founded actually as a small fishing settlement about 800 years ago, and doesn't become particularly important, as I said before, until a family known as the Hohenzollern dynasty are invited to rule over the state of Brandenburg, which was one of those electorates with Berlin at its capital. So as I say, relatively young as a capital city, and sometimes it can feel a little bit, I think sometimes when I take people on Berlin, they're kind of surprised that Berlin is a little bit more, maybe a little bit more, or it's a little less quote unquote German than they think, maybe. They think that they're coming to kind of proper beer halls and lederhosen and that kind of thing, and that's not really the case when you come into the city. It's a little bit more of a different vibe, I suppose. Sometimes we have, you know, when you get the bachelor parties and the stag do's, when they come into the city, sometimes they dress up in their lederhosen, and a lot of the Berliners are like, that's not us. That's not an us thing, you know. So sure, but it's not really us. So yeah, it's definitely, it's quite a contemporary city, but also very much kind of the past is very, very present at the same time. So something I always kind of really enjoy about it as well is that it's a bit difficult to pin down, and I do find that when I'm welcoming people into the city, they're not entirely sure what to expect. And there's definitely, it's very much known for its nightlife. It's very, very super cool nightlife, which I have to admit I'm not really a part of. Because it's too late. They start too late. There's a big electronic music scene, there's a big kind of techno scene, but also there's just a little bit of everything for everyone. I think you can find interest if you're into jazz. There's a lot of, you know, there's a jazz music scene. Berlin was actually the capital of European jazz in the 1920s and early 30s. It was obviously something that Hitler and the Nazis were not very keen on, and it was never outright banned, but very much, you know, completely, you know, discouraged, especially amongst the youth. So it has a little bit more of that. I always think it's just got a bit more of a punk rock feeling, essentially. And up on our right, in just a moment, we're going to go past a car park with lots and lots and lots of little cars that you're going to see in just a moment. If you have a look out to your right here, everyone, just next to this huge balloon that is tethered and goes up and down, you see a lot of these little cars, very similar little cars. Some of them are giraffe print, some of them are zebra print. These are Trabis or Trabants. And Trabants were the one brand of car that were manufactured in East Berlin that you could get your hands on if you were an ordinary East German person. Let's go this way. And because of the shortages in East Germany, you might have to put yourself on a waiting list, and you might have to wait between 9 and 15 years to get one. So that was how long you'd have to wait to get a Trabi or a Trabant, essentially. But a lot of people from the former East Germany say, well, when we got our Trabi, it was like every Christmas and every birthday rolled into one. Because it was, you know, it gave people a lot of freedom. You didn't have freedom of movement to the west, but you certainly had freedom of movement to the east. You know, so people could drive to other parts of East Germany. They could go to Poland and Hungary, and that was very exciting, you know, for a lot of people. So straight. As we come up straight over this way, everyone, we're going to go across a road called Friedrichstraße, and Friedrichstraße is one of the kind of main shopping boulevards of the city today. It's also where, well, later on when we're going to go to Checkpoint Charlie, but spoiler alert, you're not allowed to look yet. Friedrichstraße is actually where, up until 1933, there were over 250 bars, clubs and brothels along this one stretch of road. It was a great place to go and have a good time. And Marlene Dietrich, the German singer, the Berlin singer, who was born in Berlin in 1901 in Schöneberg, not too far from where you're staying in the southwestern part of the city, that's where she was born. She would come and sing in a lot of the cabarets along Friedrichstraße. One of my favourite stories about her is that she quite famously was very, very, very anti-Nazi, and she and she would get American citizenship in the mid-1930s quite quietly, and a lot of the Nazi film executives would try to court her to have her come back to Berlin to make films for them and their regime, and she always kind of politely and discreetly declined. And then in 1937 she had this one plan. She said to one of her many lovers that she had this plan that they were going to go to back to Berlin when she was asked, and she would get a secret meeting with Joseph Goebbels, who was the head of propaganda, and then she would get a private audience with Hitler, and then she'd seduce him, and then she'd stab him. And apparently this boyfriend was like, no, I don't think that's a very good idea. And apparently the only thing that really put her off was that she said, well, I will have to be naked and I will have to conceal a weapon. So that was so she was really trying to figure that out. Maybe they should have let her try. We're in Kreuzberg. Kreuzberg is quite a well-heeled area now. It never used to be. During the division, it was a part of the city that was very close to it. Kind of, the Berlin Wall almost formed a bit of a peninsula around it, and as a result, it was quite cut off from the west of West Berlin. As a result, it was quite an impoverished area for quite a long time. And of course, since the wall came down in 1989, you have increased, investment and gentrification of the area, and now it's actually a little bit more expensive. So it's the kind of southern, westerly-most part of the city. A lot of the evidence of that as you go around. I always say my rule of thumb tends to be that if a building looks a bit too good to be true, it usually generally is. it's usually had some work done to it. So sometimes it's a bit difficult to say what is exactly and what is exactly not original. But when you look out ahead, everybody, or just on our left-hand side here, you can see the bombed-out church. And Berliners really like to nickname buildings, and they call this one the Rotten Tooth, because it looks a bit like a hollowed-out tooth. And very importantly, I think Maria said that her dad was involved in the building. You can see the lattice work, kind of squat octagonal building there. That is the church today. So the two buildings on the either side of the bombed out building are the church and the modern church and the modern belfry that you can see on either side. And they are nicknamed the Lipstick and the Compact, because they look a little bit like lipstick and the compact. And Maria's dad worked on building the roof of the octagonal shape there, because as I understand, to avoid, and you don't mind me telling this story, so avoiding your military service here in Germany, you could come to West Berlin. Because of course West Berlin is its own little strange little political enclave in the middle of East Germany. And again, don't worry if that's not exactly clear, we'll break it down as we carry on. And it means that West Berlin became this kind of slightly odd little place. You know, you have a very different kind of system, you can come along the Kurfürstendamm and go shopping, that kind of thing. And yes, you could avoid military service if you were a young man by coming to West Berlin. So, always like to, this is another thing I love about being a tour guide in Berlin, is that usually you meet people who have some stories, or who have some direct contacts with people who lived here and saw the wall go up or went through Checkpoint Charlie. Maybe some of you has anyone been to Berlin before? Oh, good. We can tell you absolutely anything. Good. So on your right-hand side here, everybody, we're coming past KaDeWe, and the KaDeWe is kind of like your Christmas tree is already up. It is very pretty. I mean, I don't know how I feel about that, everybody, but yeah, we feel good about it. Okay, that's how we feel. So the KaDeWe is kind of like your German Harrods, if you like. It is your kind of upmarket shopping hall, and I would definitely recommend, if you wanted to go in and have a wander, I like to go straight upstairs to the 6th floor, and that is where you have the food hall. There's a champagne bar, and has this already happened? Yeah. Oh, good. The 6th floor, yeah. The 6th floor, lots of different cheeses, lots of different wines, very, very nice. I would definitely recommend that, and especially if they've already got the Christmas decorations up, you can feel very, very Christmassy. And then coming up on the left hand side, you have the train station of Wittenbergplatz. You also see a sign on the outside there as well, everybody, with the names of some different concentration camps and death facilities that were built and constructed during the Nazi era between 1933 and 1945. And as we go around the city today, obviously sometimes it's a little bit up and down. Sometimes you're really diving into some really, really dark and very distressing history in some instances. But the train station that you can see there at Wittenbergplatz, that was a train station. As with a lot of train stations across the city, they were utilised to deport Jewish people, in some instances, Sinti and Roma people, or quote-unquote gypsies, as the Nazis categorised them. And we'll kind of break that down a little bit more as we carry on as well. So, important to note that a lot of the train stations, some of the train stations, quite often they are used in these deportations. They're quite central in the city, so that it's not exactly that people don't see what was happening, when people are being deported. So, if we go a little bit further back, everybody, thinking about our timeline as we head from the southwestern part of the city, we've come around from not too far away from Zoologischer Garten, which is kind of the central part of West Berlin. It's along the bottom southern part of the Tiergarten, and the Tiergarten is the main kind of park in the centre of the city, and we're going to edge along around it a couple of times today. And the Tiergarten is, Tier means animal in German, and originally it was where the royals had their hunting grounds and that kind of thing. So as time's gone by, this park that was on the outskirts of the city tends to kind of grow up around, because of course it gets bigger and bigger, and eventually it becomes incorporated into one of the main central parks of the city. So the Tiergarten also includes the zoo on the southern western part of it. We have pandas, we have baby pandas, We're very proud of that. And then just on the right hand side here, everybody, you have a building, this kind of quite modern, Art Deco looking building, which was the Café Metropole. It was also a cinema there that was quite famous during the 1920s and early 30s. And a lot of this stretch of road that we have here along Bülowstrasse, this area is very well known for its street art, and Berlin more generally is very well known for its street art. It might be something that you notice. There can be quite a lot of graffiti. On the right hand side, just coming up in a second, with this very large kind of purple and red painting here, this is the Street Art Museum that you can just see on the right hand side here. It's something that there's a lot of in Berlin. And that is because well, for various different reasons, really. A lot of people I know from Berlin will say, well, it's kind of about, you know, how Berlin is stake their claim on how the city looks. You know, you've had a lot of authoritarian dictatorships and leaderships in this city, and this is the way that they kind of, you know, make sure that they make sure it's their own, essentially. So there's a spectrum, of course. Some of it's pretty crap. You know, some of it is just tagging and that kind of thing. But I did have a lady once on a tour, and she said, "Is this because of gangs?" And it's not so much because of gangs. I mean, of course, there are gangs. You're not going to see them. Don't worry. So, but you know, so don't worry too much about that. And certainly, we're going to, when we later on in the tour, when we go to the East Side Gallery, we'll see the larger section of the Berlin Wall, which is spray painted and painted by a lot of different artists who were here in 1990 after the wall had come down, essentially.